Before I talk about that, though, I have to tell you that every dog is different. So what your neighbor may say, well, my dog has to be corrected at this level, has nothing at all to do with your dog. The level of correction that you use on a dog has nothing to do with the breed of the dog, nothing to do with the sex of the dog, nothing to do with the age of the dog, and nothing to do with the size of the dog. How hard you correct a dog is dependent on the temperament of the dog. Is the dog a hard dog? Is the dog a soft dog? A hard dog is a dog that when you give him a correction, he looks at you and he says, is that the best you can do? A soft dog is a dog when you give him a correction, a normal correction, they hit the ground, tuck their tail, and act like you just beat him to death. So you need to start by experimenting with corrections to see where your dog's ouch correction is. Start at level 2 or level 3. Not much of a correction. When the correction isn't hard enough, the dog won't stop doing what you want him to stop doing. He may stop for a second or so, maybe give you just a second of eye contact, and then go right back to doing what he was doing. That's not a hard enough correction. I want to administer a correction that will stop the dog from doing what he was doing before. I want the dog to remember next time, I better stop this or I'm going to get a correction like I got last time. And the correction can't be so hard that the dog will just shut down and quit working. So there's a fine line here. If you have a dog that likes food and you correct it and it won't eat food, that correction was too hard. Obviously not a ouch correction. That's a killed me correction. If you have a dog that's really crazy for a ball and you give him a correction and he won't play with a ball, that correction's too hard. So we want to correct at a level where the dog just says, ouch, okay, I'll do it, and not at a level that says, ah, I'm really hurt, I don't want to do this, I don't want to be here. And we want to correct hard enough so the dog just doesn't say, okay, and then goes right back and does what he wants to do. So you have to determine how hard to correct your dog. One of the points that you need to keep in your mind here is, people ask me, well, when is my dog ready for a correction? The dog is ready for a correction when you know 100% in your mind that when you tell him to do something, he knows how to do that command. There can be no question here. The dog has to know and understand the command that you give him. If he then gives you the finger and goes and continues doing and doesn't mind it, that dog needs a correction. If the dog doesn't understand the command, it's not fair to correct him for not following your orders. It's pretty common sense. Dog training isn't rocket science. So ask yourself, does he understand it? Yes, he does. Then he deserves a correction. Then how hard should the correction be? Well, we have to move through the different levels to see where he is. The ouch correction is the level of correction that you want to use on your dog. So the question people are asking themselves is, well, how do I figure out what level is the ouch correction for my dog? That's a good question, because corrections and the levels of correction that you need for dogs is not breed specific, it's not size specific. It has to do with the hardness and softness of a dog. I have seen 100-pound dogs that require less of a correction than 20-pound dogs. My mother used to have a poodle that required a very hard correction to get the ouch correction. Whereas on a soft dog, you may only have to give, on a scale of 1 to 10, a level 2 or a level 3 correction to accomplish the same thing. So it's up to you to determine what level to use. How do you do it? The correct way to do it is start at what you would consider a level 2 or a level 3 correction. Give the dog a correction and see if it gives you the kind of response that you want. A dog that when you give it a correction, he just stops what he's doing just for a second or two, maybe gives you eye contact, and then goes right back to doing what he was doing, that was not a hard enough correction. You need to jack it up to maybe level 4 or level 5. What you're looking for, and what I tell people is that you have to give the dog a hard enough correction so that he stops doing what he's doing and does what you want him to do, and the correction can't be so hard that he won't respond to a reward or to praise. In other words, after a correction, when he comes to me and does what I want him to do and I praise him, his temperament has to come right back up. If I correct a dog so hard, a dog that likes a food reward, if I correct that dog so hard that he won't take a food reward from me, that was too hard. If I have a dog that likes to play with a ball and I correct him so hard that he won't play with a ball, the correction was too hard. Now, with that said, when you move through your training schedule, you're going to find possibly that after a few weeks, when you give an ouch correction that you've used for the first 2 weeks, it may not give you the desired results. So you have to jack the level a little bit. And another very important thing is, keep this in mind. The higher in drive that your dog is, the higher correction level it requires. So a dog that is just working in the front yard and we're working on the sit command or the stay command and there's no distractions may require maybe a level 3 correction. That same exact dog in the same exact spot, when your wife would come out or your kids would come out and they are a distraction for the dog, it may have to have a level 4 correction. Or the same exact dog in the same spot, when friends come over with kids and maybe another dog, that dog may require a level 7 or a level 8 correction to stay down when I tell him to stay. So don't forget that. It's very important, and I'm going to repeat it. The higher in drive, the harder the correction. The longer you train your dog, you may have to raise the level of correction. The exception to that rule is in electric collar training. A lot of times in electric collar training, after you've trained your dog for a while and he knows all the exercises, and maybe you had been using a mid-level stimulation and the dog gets used to the collar training, you can tone the collar down a little. You don't have to use it so hard. You just may have to nick it at, say, 80% of what you had been using. Now, we have to also talk about one other thing in relationship to corrections. If you give your dog a correction, right after you give the correction, when the dog stops doing whatever he was doing that you corrected him for, when he stops that behavior, you need to praise the dog. Remember what I said, dogs live in a black and white world. Just like we mark what we want our dogs to do, we correct the dog at the exact spot, the exact snapshot in time for what we don't want him to do. And when he stops that behavior after a correction, we praise him and tell him, good, that's good. So, when you correct your dog, don't forget this. When you correct your dog, always praise him when he stops doing that behavior. It's a different concept and maybe a hard concept for people to understand, because they think, well, I just corrected the dog. He just screwed up. Why do I praise him right away? You praise him right away because in the dog's mind, he stopped doing what you corrected him for. So always praise after you correct. I compare it to if you have a boss that needs to give somebody or you a correction, and he comes up and he chews you out and he turns around and walks away, leaves you there. Compare that to the same guy, to the same situation where a boss comes up, he chews you out for doing something wrong, and then he says, okay, I know you can do better than that. I know you want to do better than that. You just made a mistake. Let's put it behind us and move on.